If you want to be more effective in your work and in your life, and you'd like to have more confidence that you're meeting your intentions, this is where it begins. Welcome to Do Busy Right, helping you organize your information and manage your attention so that they work for you, not against you. We educate you and encourage you by discussing ways to be more effective, not more exhausted. Let's do busy right. Today, I'm going to talk about the notion that we need more reminders than alarms in our lives. And that's a little bit of a provocative title just to really kind of capture your interest and help you think about what it is we'll be talking about today. You may not know the difference between reminders and alarms. I'll be very precise about that, but it's a critical distinction for two reasons. One is we are sort of forced, and I'll explain all this, we're sort of forced to use the wrong tool for the wrong job. Given our typical environment, we wind up using the wrong tool for the wrong job. The second reason that it's critical is once you understand what we're talking about here, you'll begin to see the value of having the right system. And that will mean that you will go and download the free resource that I have for you. And I'll talk about what that is at the right time. I'll make sure that you have a chance to get your hands on that tool, which is going to be immensely valuable for you. But first, I want to talk to you about why you need it. So in order to do that, I'll start by talking about two different kinds of tasks. And then we'll look at reminders and alarms and talk about what they actually are, why they're different. And then finally, we'll match up the tool that we use, reminders versus alarms, to the task type. And then again, kind of near the end of the talk, I'll give you a way to create the correct tool and start taking advantage of reminders in your world. And once you're able to do that, then that'll reduce your interruptions, it'll reduce your distractions, and those two things together will improve your ability to focus on your work and deliver your results rather than being interrupted and distracted and never actually completing things. And there's a couple of background ideas I'll throw in just for reminders. These are things that I've talked about before, but I'll make sure, in case this is your first listen to the podcast, that you understand a little bit about what we're talking about there. But first, let's talk about a story. I live in Alabama in the U.S. And if you know anything about Alabama, you may be aware that we have tornadoes pretty common. Other parts of the U.S. have snowfall. Some parts of the U.S. have hurricanes. Some parts of the U.S. have earthquakes. Our problem here in Alabama is primarily tornadoes. Since we have tornadoes and people die because of tornadoes, here in this state, we've set up a system of tornado sirens. And this comes to mind because they test the tornado sirens on the first Wednesday of every month at noon. And that was Wednesday of last week as I'm recording this. I live less than half a mile from a tornado siren. So when it goes off, I'm aware of it. It gets my attention. And that's great because that's its job. And so the tornado siren goes off. We say, is it Wednesday? Is it noon? Is it cloudy outside? And if all the answers to those questions are correct, then we ignore the tornado siren and recognize that it's a test. But it does get our attention. And again, that's good because that's its job. So I was listening to this happening and I was thinking about what I was doing, and I was thinking, okay, well, this is a really good example of the difference between reminders and alarms. And we'll talk about what that is. But first, I want to talk about a couple of different kinds of tasks that we face in our world as we're trying to get things done. A couple of different, if you will, delivery signals for tasks. So there are many kinds of tasks, but on this spectrum, I want to highlight two kinds of tasks. And the two types are tasks that must start at, and the other kind is tasks that must end by. Okay. And if you think closely, you'll see these are two different kinds of things based on, well, when do we begin to do the task? How do we think about the task? So if we look at started by tasks that have to be started by a particular time, then we think of tasks that are fairly high urgency. And I'll just use some simple examples. One is take the brownies out of the oven before they burn. So that's a task. And that task has a start by constraint. So we put the brownies in the oven and we know we need to get them out. We need to start the get the brownies out of the oven task in, say, 20 minutes. Therefore, when we want to remind ourselves to do this task, we set an alarm type signal that gets our attention and we go, oh, this task must start now. So that's a started by task. Finished by kinds of tasks are those that have deadlines and have delivery dates. Okay. So must start by tasks are tasks that begin with the deadline. Must finish by kinds of tasks are those that have to end, that have to be complete before a certain point in time. The report is due by Tuesday at the end of business. If you think about the work that you do, it's very likely that most of your work is actually must be finished by kind of work as compared to must start by. Now, this is a little bit unclear because we tend to, I'll say, merge the two thoughts together because we're always interested in, okay, what's next? So if all I know is, hey, the task must be finished by the end of day Tuesday, and I tell myself at the end of the day Tuesday, hey, this task should be complete by now, it's too late to start the work. And so we take our must be complete by, must finish by style tasks, and we do some math and we back up. And then we say, okay, well, if I'm going to finish it by this and such a date, then I've got to start it at this and such a time or day in order to have time to do my process that generates the results. And then the result will be ready by the time I need it to be finished. So if you're baking brownies and you need to carry them with you to an event, well, you're going to leave the house at 11:30 because it's a lunch event and you're going to bake the brownies. The brownies take about an hour. So you're going to set a must start by constraint at about 10:30. And then you're just doing the math. Now, will that work? Yes, it will. But it's a little bit of a challenge to do that because you don't know when you set all this up, you don't know what task you're going to be working on at 10:30 on that day. So the must start by signal that we create is a little bit artificial. And we set an alarm that says, hey, start baking the brownies, and it goes off at 10:30 and it interrupts us. That notion that we have to start this work can interrupt other work. Okay, and this is a very simple example. Of course, we all plan around all this kind of stuff. But my premise is that our tools don't suit all of the different task types that we need to be able to accomplish. And so that's why I'm making this real clear with a fairly simple example. So if you think about all of the different kinds of work that you do, you'll probably see that the majority, if not the overwhelming majority of things that you need to do have a, if they have a constraint at all, have a must be finished by constraint. Now, I've sort of glossed over a concept that I think is pretty important here, so we'll go back and cover that now. And that concept is this notion of task signals. Okay. So task signals are really important because what we're trying to do here on the Do Busy Right podcast is we're trying to get clarity and calmness. We're trying to remove interruptions and distractions from our lives so that when it's time to focus on our work, we can actually put our focus where it needs to be. And I also recognize that there are many more things to do than you can do at any one time. And this is true for human beings in general. It's not difficult for us as human beings to think up things we need to or want to do. And as we do that, we think of all of these things, but then we realize that we can only do one thing at a time. Again, I don't want to enter into the multitasking argument. So we'll just say one or a very small number of things at one time. But there's this huge number of things that we want to get done. There's this huge number of things that perhaps our boss expects of us or our customers expect of us. And so we're the ones that have to be responsible for planning and ordering our lives such that we can do one task at a time. We can focus on it for the correct amount of time and energy, and then we can complete it, deliver it, and then move on to the next thing so that we don't have a pile of partially completed tasks hanging around. I say all that to say one of the most important, but either overlooked or misunderstood decisions we wind up making on a daily basis is the decision to postpone work. We've got an infinite number of things we could be doing right now, but we know that we can only do a very small number of that infinite number of things. And so there's I'm going to say infinite number of things that we need to deal with, that we need to organize so that we don't forget that we intend to do them. So when we think about that, what we're actually doing is we're making a decision to postpone work. So it occurs to us that we might want to do something. We recognize that now, for any number of reasons, is not the right time to do it. But in order to have clarity and peace of mind, we want to take the step of actually recording the decision that we postponed that task. If we don't record the decision that we postponed the task, and I'll talk about how to do this, then what we wind up doing is it stays in our heads and then it pops up at unpredictable times. And in the Do Busy Right world, we call that a distraction. Distractions are at least as bad as interruptions when we're trying to focus and get our work done. And you know the scenario. You're sitting there doing some work and your brain says, hey, what about task X? What about doing the laundry? And it's not the right time to do the laundry. And not only is it not the right time to do the laundry, it's not even the right time to be reminded about doing the laundry because that's a distraction from what we're working on. So we have to postpone a huge number of tasks in our world. And we want to keep track of that postponement decision so that it doesn't stick in our brains and pop up at these inconvenient times when we're trying to focus on something else. In order to track a postponement decision, we need to create a task signal, what I call a task signal. And I just kind of made up that term and I'll explain why. A task signal reminds us that there is something to do. So we've taken the thought of, hey, I need to do blah. We've taken that thought out of our heads and we've put it into our system. And our system then needs to produce a task reminder so that A, we don't forget to do the task, and B, we don't hang on to the notion that we need to do the task. We don't hang on to that task signal in our heads. So a task signal is an indication that something needs to be done. Now, when we put our task signals in the system, there are really a couple of different ways to think about a task signal, and we'll get into that. But in attention compass kind of thinking, where we're trying to free our attention to focus on our task, you can see where task signals are very important because we're tracking all of these postponements that we really are forced to do by the nature of our reality. Okay, we can't do everything at once, and we can think of things all the time that we want to do. So we eject those out of our skull, and the real mechanism that we use is this notion of task signals. Now, there's lots of different ways to do a task signal. Some people put task signals on their calendars, and the calendar is the right place for some task signals. Other task signals don't belong on the calendar, but we put them there because that's the only place we have to put them. Some people put their task signals in to-do lists. So they create a to-do list. And the task signal is that this item is on this piece of paper that's sitting on my desk. I'll look at the piece of paper at some point later today, and I'll recognize that I had postponed a task. And so now I need to address that postponement decision. So lots of different ways to do it. People use sticky notes as task reminders. I use my laundry basket as a task reminder. And we really want to think through how to create good task signals. And again, that's to avoid this distraction and interruption idea. So as we're making these postponement decisions and creating these task signals, we want to think closely about what kind of task signal we need to create and how we need to create it. So that maps pretty closely to the kinds of tasks as we talked about just a minute ago. And again, this mismatch of task signal type with task type causes problems in our system. Okay. The most prevalent problem is a task is due, say, at the end of the day tomorrow, and I create a task signal for today that interrupts the work that I'm doing today, such that I'll change over my focus and start working on the task that's due at the end of the day tomorrow. And how we set this up is very important to our planning, and it's very important as we attempt to minimize the interruptions and distractions in our world. So as we look at task signals, we tend to want to, I'll say, automate our task signals. And this is important because we don't want to use our brains for this. We want to get them out in the world and put our task signals out there somewhere where the environment will explain to us, oh yeah, we need to do this task. And in general, just like there are two kinds of tasks, in general, there are two kinds of task signals. Okay. So we have a high urgency task signal, and that's an alarm. The tornado siren that I was talking about in my story earlier is a high urgency kind of task signal. Now, the real best application of a high urgency kind of task signal is to a must begin by task. And if you think about the tornado siren, When it's not being tested, when it's really a live action tornado alert, then that's its point, is to get us started on a must begin by task. And that task is go to your safe place so that you don't die from a tornado. And in Alabama, we all know how to do this. And you people in Oklahoma and Nebraska, people in Mississippi, y'all know how to do this as well. The Midwest has lots of tornadoes, so y'all know how to do this, right? You go to your storm shelter, ideally. Now, we're all a little bit jaded. Those of us that live in tornado parts of the world are probably a little bit jaded. So the alarm goes off and we go look out the window, right? To see, well, is the tornado actually affecting me? But the point is that this alarm is intended to trigger us to take an action, to do a task. And that task is a must start by task. It's not, you must be in your safe place by the time it gets dark. It's no, go to your safe place now and begin the task. Just like we set an alarm signal to take the brownies out of the oven. The remove brownies from the oven task must start at the time immediately when the brownies are done and before the brownies are burned. And so we set this high urgency kind of alarm task signal in order to make that happen. Now, since this is a high urgency signal, it produces an interruption for us. And that's its job. You need to be interrupted by certain kinds of things under certain circumstances, particularly those where your safety or the safety of your brownies are at risk. Another kind of must begin by task that's associated with this high urgency alarm style task signal is get out of bed. So you may have an alarm clock that produces for you a task signal that is wake up and get out of bed and start your day. It's intended to interrupt what we're doing, and it's pretty good at its job often. The thing that it's interrupting is our sleep task. We're very focused on our sleep in some abstract sense. And it's a challenge for a system to get our attention. And so this alarm clock thing that we've created is a high urgency task signal that's intended to interrupt whatever we're doing at the time and get us to do something else. So that's this high urgency alarm style task signal. The other kind of task signal is a low urgency task signal. A low urgency task signal is a list. So a list is not going to jump up at you. You have to look at the list in order to understand that there are task signals on it, but they're low urgency. And low urgency reminder style task signals are best associated with tasks that fall into the must finish by category. Because we saw a couple minutes ago, we saw the misfit between a high urgency signal and a must complete by task. And we saw that typically we kludge these things together so that a must complete by kind of task winds up with a must start by kind of task signal. Okay. Now, why is that, you may be wondering, and we'll get to that. But if we think about reminders as this low urgency kind of task signal, then we see that with reminders, we have the opportunity to get all of these task signals out, all of these low urgency task signals, get them out, think about them, put them in some sort of an order, okay, versus an alarm style task signal. So if you're asleep and your alarm clock goes off and you turn it off, let's ignore the snooze button for now, and you turn it off and go back to sleep, then that task signal has really not performed its function. Okay. So much the same way, if we use a high urgency task signal for a must be completed by task, then we fall into a similar problem. So let's build out a scenario here. So I have a report that's due by the end of the day, Friday. Okay. And because I don't have lots of low urgency reminders in my life, I don't have a system for low urgency task signals in my life, I use a high urgency task signal. And I set a reminder of some type, an alarm on my phone. I create an empty calendar appointment and put a reminder on that calendar appointment, or I otherwise give myself this high urgency task signal at what I expect to be the amount of time it's going to take me to do the work, right? So it's due by the end of the day, Friday, and I thought about it, and I think it's going to take me 4 hours to do it, and I'm going to be generous with myself. So I'm going to set the must begin by task signal for, say, noon on Thursday. Okay. So all this is great, except it doesn't work well. So my alarm style task signal goes off at noon on Thursday. Well, perhaps noon on Thursday is the right time to start this task, but most likely it's not. Also, most likely at noon on Thursday, I'm in the middle of doing some other piece of work. And what happens with the alarm style high urgency task signal is I've created an unnecessary interruption in my world because I don't have a good system for the right kind of task signal for this kind of task. So my alarm goes off. I go, yeah, start the report. But I'm in the middle of something else right now. And I've got plenty of time to do the report. So ideally, I would go ahead and finish what I'm doing and then move my attention to the report task. But I either interrupt what I'm doing, so I'm already interrupted because the alarm went off. And so the alarm goes off and I go, well, that's for the report task, but I don't want to do the report task, right? I don't want to start the report task right now. I want to finish what I'm doing. So I turn off the alarm. I turn off this high urgency signal. Well, if I in fact turn it off, then my whole system is now out of whack because I no longer have a task signal for this report task. So a few different things could happen, all of which are bad. So I go back to the work that I was doing, I turn the alarm off and don't do anything else. Okay. Well, and perhaps both, forget to begin that report task. And perhaps both now have that signal in my skull so that it's trying to remind me all the time, hey, you need to start the report. Well, I'm doing other things. I don't want that distraction to happen for me all the time while I'm finishing up this other thing, right? And so that's what happens if we just slap this alarm down. Okay. So for example, we just turn it off like we talked about with the alarm clock. Okay. The other option is that we snooze the reminder. And this is an idea that came from our bedside alarm clocks, and now it's incorporated into at least Outlook's version of alarm style reminders, right? Which is, interestingly enough, the Outlook version of an alarm style reminder or an alarm style task signal is actually misnamed because they call it reminders. And it's not really an appointment reminder, it's an appointment alarm because it produces this high urgency signal, most likely when we're doing something else. So anyway, we might turn the alarm off altogether, okay? And that has these two high risk outcomes. We might snooze the alarm, which if you use the snooze button on your alarm clock, in my world, the snooze button is almost more painful than just getting up out of bed. And your mileage may vary here, but just the notion that I've snoozed it and my snooze is for 10 minutes almost definitely means I'm not going to go back to sleep, but I'm going to be waiting for this alarm to go off again. So we can snooze reminders, but that just postpones the interruption. So we get the interruption, we don't want to deal with it, so we slap it down with a snooze, and it pops up again 10 minutes later, and we've gotten 2 interruptions for the price of 1. Okay, so that's the other thing that can't happen, and that outcome is bad. And then the third thing that we could do is to stop what we're doing, recreate that reminder, that alarm style task signal, recreate that at another time, which will take some number of seconds and is a fairly severe interruption of the work that we were doing. So ideally, we just make these interruptions go away. Well, the biggest problem with that is that our systems are designed almost exclusively with alarm style task signals. You can think of 100 of them, right? And that's what our systems present to us as tools, okay? And so while you're thinking about your environment and thinking about all these different alarm style tools, I want to make sure that I remind you that there is a solution for this. And I'm going to talk about what it is. I'm going to give you a way to build a robust reminder style task signaling system for yourself. And we're going to walk through a little bit of how to use that such that we can make task reminders, task signals that match the appropriate kind of task. So if we have a must complete by task, then we can associate a reminder style task signal to that. And then we can avoid having to set an alarm style task signal. Okay. And this is going to create for us less distraction, less interruption, and a much more productive workflow. And so later on, I'll explain how you can get that resource. But for now, we're looking at our environment and we're looking at the tools available. So when you look at your computer, when you look at your phone, when you look at your clock, all of these things produce these alarm style task signals. Okay. The only real option, and we talked about this before, is your paper list of things to do today, or the other version of things to do today, which is sticky notes all around your monitor. Well, those systems are okay, but they don't travel well. They don't hold enough stuff, and they tend to confuse us. So I'm going to develop a reminder system for you and show you how to get access to this system for free here in just a minute. But if we look at our computer and we say, okay, well, my calendar will produce a task signal. So we say, all right, I've got the report due at the end of the day, Friday. So I'm going to create an appointment at lunch on Thursday. And The appointment is going to be basically a placeholder that says, hey, start the report. And then I'm going to set a appointment reminder. I'm using air quotes for reminder. That is actually not a reminder, but an alarm style task signal so that it interrupts whatever I'm doing and signals the task of begin the work on the report. But that's really not what we need, because we don't have to start the report at noon on Thursday. We built ourselves plenty of time. And so when we see those kinds of task signals, we need to be very careful about selecting them as the way to signal ourselves that a task needs to be started. So that's calendar alarms, okay? You can build alarms in your phone, right? You can set an alarm clock. You can set a countdown timer. You can set a kitchen alarm. You can get one of the tomato timers and do the Pomodoro technique. But all of these things are designed to interrupt whatever we're doing when it goes off. And we don't know what we're going to be doing when it goes off. And so this mismatch presents a challenge to us in our systems. So most of the task signals that are readily available to us are this alarm style task signal. Now, if we have a good reminder style task signal, then here's what happens. We have a process for dealing with our reminder style task signals. We're able to inspect those at a time when we still have the opportunity to plan our time. And we can say, oh, on Thursday morning, say we go, oh, I've got a reminder style task signal that says, remember that the report is due by the end of the day on Friday. And I can take that out and I can go, okay, well, that fits into my work today in these ways. And I can plan my day out so that at an appropriate time where the context is right, where I'm not interrupting other work, I can begin the work. I can begin the task of creating this report. So the problem is we have to build this system. It doesn't really exist for us in any of our tools. There's not really a ready-made way to do this. And we also have to build a workflow around it. So since reminder style task signals don't jump out at us, then we need to build a routine part of our workflow where we inspect our reminder style task signals and we work them more gently, if you will, into our work for the day. Okay. So again, the notion here is we want to match the type of task signal to the type of task. And again, if your task is take the brownies out of the oven before they burn, or if your task is go to your safe place so you don't die from a tornado, then certainly an alarm style reminder is exactly the right way to go. An alarm style task signal is certainly the right way to go. But very few of our tasks are that must begin by style of task. So when we create this reminder style task signal, we know we're going to use it a lot, but we really have tried a couple of different ways to do this that I think are really not as useful as we might hope they would be. So we've got a whole stack of sticky notes. So let's say, for example, that you use sticky notes as your reminder style task system. Well, remember that we're postponing a lot of tasks. We're not just postponing 2 or 3 tasks. We might be postponing 100 or more tasks. And as we get more comfortable with a reminder style system, and as we utilize it more and see its value, the number of reminder style task signals we have will actually increase. So I would guess that at any point, I probably have north of 100 reminder style task signals. And I will say that reminder style task signals also perform another important function. There is a third kind of task that I didn't introduce earlier because it overcomplicates kind of the whole situation. And this kind of task, so we talked about a must begin by style task, which is take the brownies out of the oven. We talked about a must be complete by kind of task, which is create the report and deliver it. The other kind of task that we're quite commonly faced with is a can't start until kind of task, which means, hey, I want to paint the garage. I want to paint the walls in the garage because they're credit. Well, I can't paint the walls in the garage until I clean the garage. So now we have this in project management, they're called task constraints. But now we have this can't start until style task. And I can't start the painting task until the cleaning task is done. And reminders, just as a side benefit, really help with this situation as well. Okay, you certainly can't set an alarm for start painting the garage walls because the alarm is not going to respond to the I've finished cleaning the garage task. Okay, so this does get a little bit more complex. And don't want to dig too far down into that, but just recognize that if we have these can't start until kinds of tasks, and a good example of a can't start until style task is your annual IRS tax filings. You really can't start filing your taxes until you get certain reports from your employer, if that's your deal. Okay. If you don't have an employer, then you really can't start your tax filing until your accountant gives you certain paperwork from the business the previous year. And so reminder style task signals also help a lot with these can't start until kinds of tasks. And I'll explain how that tightly links in another episode in the future. But this whole reminder style task signal is very beneficial to us. It's much lower stress. It doesn't produce interruptions, and it also doesn't set us up for distraction. It more closely matches the style of task that we actually need to do. And it also helps us with two kinds of tasks, both the must be complete by and the can't start until kinds of tasks that we have in the work. So what is this reminder style task signal system? Well, it's really interesting because the technology that I'm going to recommend to you is 100+ years old. And it goes back to when file cabinets and manila folders became popular in offices, because that was the only technology we had at the time. And it's hard to think of, I guess, a little bit, but there was a time when people didn't know about file cabinets and they didn't see a need for file cabinets. And so there weren't file cabinets, right? And so these things appeared. Along with them appeared manila folders and all these different, I'm going to say technologies or tools that we sort of take for granted now. But about 100 years ago, somebody said, hey, with all these manila folders, I've got to do some organization. Really bright person, whoever it was that invented it. And so as far as I know, forgotten, but we owe them a debt of gratitude. And since it's a 100-year-old system, most people have forgotten about it or don't understand it, or it actually, the tickler file actually pops up every once in a while, every decade or so, and it's like, oh, hey, remember, this is a great technology for this particular thing, and we are reminded of it. Most recently, a guy named Merlin Mann put up a website, and this goes back to, wow, I guess this goes back to around 15 years ago now when he put up this site. It was called 43 folders, because that's what a tickler file requires. A tickler or a suspense file, in order to work well, requires that you have 43 manila folders. And the tool that I'll give you, the resource that I'll give you, explains all about how to create this thing. The point is that this is the correct tool for managing reminder style task signal systems. And it's called a tickler file. Some people refer to it as a suspense file. And what we do is we create a rolling 31 days of future, and then we build in the workflow to inspect those folders for our reminders at the beginning of each day that we're working. So it's actually pretty simple. And if you'll download the resource I'm going to give you, then you'll see what's involved in creating it, and it's not hard. So I'll let you have access to that in just a minute, but it's a tickler or a suspense file. And the way you use this is you work it day by day by day. And today you'll get out the folder that's about today, and it'll have all these reminder style task signals in it, and you'll get them out on your desk, and you'll plan your day, and you'll slot these tasks into your day. Okay. Or you'll postpone some of them, or you'll recognize that some of them are already done and you don't need to worry about them anymore. But then the way the tickler file system is created and the way that you use it actually keeps it rolling for 31 days in advance. So that's a month's worth of time, which is plenty of lead time for your planning. So if you want the resource, here's what I want you to do. Go out to dobusywrite.com/tickler-file. And I'll put the link in the show notes so that you can just click on it. But it's dobusywrite.com, one word all smashed together, dobusywrite.com/tickler-file. And then you can download a PDF that is instructions for how to create this. Again, it's simple. Part of the battle is to create the habit of using it consistently, but that's part of the battle of any good tool, is learning how to use it. So, and this is my free gift to you. Okay, you go out there and let me know what email address to send the PDF to, and I'll ship that to you. If you do that, then I'll add you into some mailings that I send out on a somewhat regular basis. And then that way we can communicate better. But if that's what you want, then you can go out there and get that. And again, I'll give you the URL again. It's dobusywrite.com/tickler-file. So you can pause, you can even pause the podcast and go download it now if you want to. And I certainly would recommend that you do that, because otherwise you're going to forget about it. What are we all about here? Don't forget to do things, right? So, so with that resource, you can create a tickler file, which is a very good reminder style task signal system. And this will allow you to create and use and be effective with reminder style task signals. And that will reduce your reliance on alarm style task signals. And if we have fewer alarm style task signals in our lives, then we have fewer interruptions and distractions. Fewer interruptions and distractions allows us to focus on the work that we've chosen to do right now, to put our attention where we want it to be, and to complete our work. And this is very valuable. This is the core of the attention compass system, is that we get this stuff out of our heads, put it into a system that's well designed to do what we want it to do. So again, I can't emphasize this enough. Go get your instructions, create for yourself a tickler file system, learn how to use it, and see that the value is there. So that said, I'll do a brief recap of what we've talked about today. So I've helped you understand that there are multiple kinds of tasks, in the sense that some are must start by kinds of tasks. Some are must be complete by kinds of tasks. And then we mentioned a third kind briefly, which is a can't start until kind of task. And we talked about how those kinds of tasks need different kinds of task signals. Okay. And we talked about two kinds of task signals. There are high urgency alarm style task signals that are intended to be an interruption. They're intended to snap our focus away from wherever it is and towards that alarm. And then we talked about low urgency task signals that are, we call them reminders. And so those are better for our systems and for our planning because they don't interrupt us. We build a workflow around them. And so now that we have the capacity, because most of our tools that we use to create task signals for ourselves are alarm style task signals. Most of the things on your computer and on your phone are alarm style task signals. And so we tend to overuse them for the wrong kinds of tasks. So I gave you a resource, instructions on how to build a tickler file so that you can have a low urgency reminder style task signaling system. And you can build a workflow around that task signaling system. And now that you have this way of creating task signals, your reliance on alarm style task signals will decrease, which will give you fewer interruptions and distractions and will help you focus on getting work done now rather than being interrupted and distracted all the time. I think if you'll give the tickler file system a shot, that you'll enjoy using it and you'll find many uses for it. Perhaps one of the more odd ideas in my own reminder system, my own reminder style task signaling system, is I've set a task to renew my driver's license, which will come due 3 years from now. And I've got a task to renew my passport that will come due, I think, 6 years from now. And I no longer use a tickler file. I will say that the tickler file structure is fully integrated into the attention compass system. It is a fully baked in part of how attention compass works. And one of the real sticking points of the attention compass tool is that the tool has to support a reminder style task signal system. And so how a tool does that, and we tend to use note-taking tools, things like Notion, ClickUp, all these sorts of things. Evernote is a favorite. Joplin is a favorite. A key reason why I say certain tools are a fit for attention compass and certain tools aren't, a key reason why I make that distinction is, will the tool be able to support a reminder style task signal system? So having reminders and how they work is very important when we're talking about a tool that will support the attention compass. I say that to say, if you put together a tickler file system, a manual physical tickler file system, then you'll make progress. And you'll begin to prepare yourself for understanding the broader attention compass workflows and perhaps move in the direction of adopting the attention compass for yourself and implementing that for yourself. As a final note, I'll say, in my opinion, the reminder style task signal system is very, very helpful, but it's not the right tool for everything that we need to track in our personal information system. It's very important for task-related things, but remember, we want to get all of the things out of our skull so that we can keep them organized, so that we can put them somewhere where we can find them when we need them. And attention compass fills in that entire box, where the tickler file system may be 25% of the problem that attention compass solves. So of all the things attention compass does for us in the world, about a quarter of that is covered by the tickler file. So if you implement the tickler file, you'll be better off, but you won't be all the way there. But it will teach you a lot about the value of reminder style task signals in your world. So we've done a lot today. I put the free resource in your hands. And again, the free resource is at dobusywrite.com/tickler-file. If you didn't download it earlier, go ahead and download it now and implement that in your world. And I think you'll really be happy with the results. I'll leave it there for now. This is Larry Tribble, Ph.D. Thanks for taking some time to improve your task and information management on the Do Busy Right podcast. The show is dedicated to helping you think about how to get better at working. And we do this by improving your attention and your focus. I believe that your work is not just about your job, but about all the tasks that you do to turn yourself, your environment, and your relationships into what you want them to be. What we're really talking about here is the underpinnings of becoming who you want to be. The primary way I help people is through coaching the attention compass process. Attention compass is 4 workflows and a tool set that support our information, task, and attention management. I help people with big goals to build habits that put them in a position to achieve. We do this by eliminating wasted time and wasted attention. If you'd like to know more, you can find me on LinkedIn or go to dobusywrite.com for more information. Have a good week, more effective and less exhausted. Do Busy Right.